Okay guys, so today I want to talk about the Justice Hunters support in Doom of Dimensions, so that is Dragontail, K9, and Yummy, and how well this support fits into their current game plans. If you are new to my channel, I try to focus on deck theory and game plan, explaining how the fundamental mechanics or gimmicks that an archetype revolves around make it good or not, and how you can think of these things conceptually instead of focusing on combos or spreadsheets. Okay, so I'm going to go through the support for each archetype and then compare it to a sample deck list and show how well these cards fit into the current game plan and where exactly you would put these in a current deck list. And I think that'll give you a good idea of how good or not these cards are. So let's start with the K9 stuff. So I think this is the worst of the two cards. This is called K9 666 Jax. So obviously it's a level 5 XYZ monster. It is a generic, so 2 level 5 monsters. And it says if this card is XYZ summoned or if your opponent activates a monster effect in the hand or graveyard, so this is a trigger effect, you can detach one material from this card, then target one monster on the field. So that's the activation procedure, and detaching a material is the cost. Destroy it. You can only use this effect of Jax once per turn. And then it says a K9 XYZ monster that has this card as material gains this effect. During any turn in which your opponent has activated a monster effect in the hand or graveyard, any battle damage this card inflicts to your opponent is doubled. Now, I don't think this is like a horrible card, but to me this is not that important because the next card is more like what K9 was missing to make it an actual good deck, and I'll show you with the original deck profile I showed earlier why this makes so much sense. So K9 Noroi says, if your opponent has 2 or more cards in their hand, you can normal summon this card without tributing. So that's like the basic thing that all the K9 cards do. You can only use each of the following effects of K9 Noroi once per turn. If this card is normal summoned, so not special summoned, you specifically have to normal summon this card, you can special summon one non-machine, because this guy is a machine, K9 monster from your deck, but you cannot special summon from the extra deck except K9 monsters while you control that face-up monster. And then it says you can send one face-up K9 card you control to the graveyard, look at your opponent's hand. So let's just briefly take a look at a K9 deck here for a second. One of the biggest issues that K9 had is there aren't enough good names in the deck, to the point where almost every single deck is playing Disablaster in the OCG. So this one is a pendulum card, but it has an effect where it says, if there is a column with no cards, you can special summon this card from your hand to your zone in that column. And that's basically the only thing that matters about this card, is that it's another level 5 on field. Imagine if Ryziel was playing cards that just said, this is a level 4, if you control no monsters, you can special summon this card from your hand, or some other similar type of summoning condition. Imagine if it was literally just a level 4. That deck would be garbage. The whole thing that makes the Ryziel archetype good is that these cards trade so phenomenally well into interactions and they generate so much on their own that you kind of have to respond to them with a critical mass of interruptions, or you have to hit them at a very critical choke point and hope they don't have more gas. All of these cards bring other things out, and if you interact with them, it still leaves the body on field. So having to play a card like Disablaster in current modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Is horrendous, and basically by default tells you that this can't be the best deck in the format. But if we're going to have cards like this, which could replace, Disablaster, where we don't have to play garbage cards like this, or it would be an option to play it, and you can instead play cards like K9 Noroi, that means that we have an excellent normal summon that tutors something else out from the deck, and then also has the opportunity to look at your opponent's hand. By the way, if you look at a case for K9, this is a continuous spell that says when this card is activated, you can add a K9 monster from your deck to your hand. And then this stays on field because it's a continuous spell. So imagine, for example, you go case of K9, you activate it, and then you add the Noroi from your deck to your hand. When you normal summon this, because your opponent has 2 or more cards in their hand, you can normal summon it without tributing, then you get to special summon whatever other K9 monster from your deck. And you still get to send a face-up K9 card you control to the graveyard to look at your opponent's hand. So you could send the case of K9 that you're not using anymore to the graveyard, just like for example. So I think that K9 is the biggest winner by far in terms of playing the deck as a pure strategy, in terms of just the quality of cards they've gotten and how they naturally fit into the game plan of the deck. I mean, in this case, there isn't really much theory to discuss in terms of game plan because it's so obvious what the critical issue is. They just don't have enough good names. So this is huge for K9, and they're clearly the winner of all of these archetypes in terms of the support they've gotten. Now, the Dragontail support is more interesting and not as good, but I don't want to just copy what everyone else has been saying about this. So the first one is Dragotail Frixel. So this says, if this card is normal or special summoned, you can target a Dracotail monster in your graveyard except itself, special summon it, then return one monster you control to the hand. If this card is sent to the graveyard as material for a fusion summon, you can set a Dragotail spell or trap from your deck. And then the effects are obviously once per turn. So again, let's go and look at a sample Dragontail deck. Now, I was playing a larger K9 package in this. You don't have to do that. This is just a sample build that's pretty similar to what people in the OCG are doing. If you look at how the Dragontail basic resource economy works, is usually they have two types of cards. They're the basic spellcasters like Lucius or Lucius and Phimena, and then there are the dragon cards, and they usually work in different ways where the spellcasters, they don't give you bonus effects when they set a spell or trap. So if you use these guys as material, and you send them to the graveyard for fusion material, you set a Dragontail spell or trap from your deck, but they don't do anything else. Whereas like the Urgula, for example, if it's sent to the graveyard as material for a fusion summon, you can set a Dragontail spell or trap from your deck, and then you have a bonus effect where you can destroy a spell or trap on the field. The same thing is with Pan. And I think that the issue with this type of deck is even when you look at a card like Dragontail Frixel that actually fits the game plan perfectly in that this is another type of toolbox effect. So you're gaining another type of effect where you can special summon something, and even if you bounce something to hand, you're still keeping that resource. And because Dragontail uses a lot of material from hand, that's still a good type of effect to use. If you have more monsters on field, you get to choose what you want to return to the hand. So this actually fits naturally into the Dragontail theme of being a toolbox type deck, but the effect I think is too undertuned for it to be actually very useful. I imagine that in a very pure build, you probably would play something like one of this, but the effect itself doesn't seem particularly useful. Then we have Dragontail Sting. So this is adding to their list of toolbox traps. So this one says you target a monster and or a spell or trap in your opponent's graveyard as the activation procedure, banish them, then you can place one Dragontail card from your graveyard or banishment on the bottom of the deck, accept itself, and then draw one card. And obviously you can only do that once per turn. So now if we go back to Dragontail for a second, if you look at typical builds, they're both running Flame and Horn. So Flame is the one that targets a face-up spell on field and negates the effects, and then you can place a Dragontail card from your graveyard banishment at the bottom of the deck, accept itself, and draw a card. And then the Horn is the one that targets an attack position monster on the field, return it to the hand or extra deck, and then the same thing where you can place a Dragontail card from your graveyard or banishment to the bottom of the deck, accept itself, and draw a card. So all these cards are getting hit by like, Ash and Bell or whatever. I think the issue here is that while this actually complements the game plan perfectly and that you are adding to the toolbox of things you can do, and that makes cards like, whenever you're using Urgula or whatever it is that you're using to set your spells or traps, it gives you more flexibility to access your toolbox, and so it expands the game plan. I don't feel like the card is tuned highly enough for it to be very good. And also, how many decks actually want to just play more and more traps just because they have toolbox effects? If you think back to Malice, which has really, really good traps, they started playing just a single one, MTP07, and then siding the GWC if they were playing it at all, and then almost no one is playing TB11. So just because you have toolbox traps you can play doesn't mean that you want to play 3 traps in your main deck. So I feel like that card is, at best like a side deck type card, but it feels like a little bit underwhelming because this is modern Yu-Gi-Oh! And if the cards aren't kind of broken in terms of the resource economy, they're just not going to be played. Now we have Yummy, which is personally my favorite of all of the archetypes. So these cards are pretty interesting and unusual compared to the rest of the Yummy cards. So Marshmallow says if you control no monsters or all monsters you control are light beast monsters, there is a colon or semicolon. I always confuse the two, but anyhow, there are 2 dots here, which is extremely significant because if you go to where's my Yummy stuff? If you go to a basic Yummy card, this says if you control a Link 1 monster or level 2 Synchro monster, you can special summon this card from your hand. There are no dots on this, which means that this is an inherent summon. It is not an activated effect. But if we go back to Marshmallow, which actually has a different summoning condition, if you control no monsters or all monsters you control are light beast monsters, then as an activated effect, not an inherent summon, you can special summon this card from your hand. So to me, this is interesting because it feels like they are giving it an upside of you don't actually have to control monsters for this to be useful. This is just a free summon, but also it activates from the hand, which means that it starts a chain. Your opponent has an opportunity to respond to it. And also in a K9 or Izuna type meta where activating effects from hand are very important, this does turn your opponent's cards on much more. And also, like in the pure builds, most people were playing songs. You obviously don't have to play pure. There are tons of other options with Yummy, but then you can't really play this type of card because it says if you activated this card from your hand, you cannot activate the effects of monsters in your hand, graveyard, and banishment until the end of the next turn. So obviously this didn't stop you from special summoning any of the Yummy monsters because these were inherent summons, but now that Marshmallow is not an inherent summon, you actually wouldn't be able to use Marshmallow. So anyhow, if this card is normal or special summoned, you can add a Yummy spell/trap from your graveyard to your hand, or if this card was special summoned by the effect of a Synchro monster, you can place a Yummy field spell or Yummy continuous spell/trap from your deck or banishment face up on your field instead. So this is a pretty strong toolbox type effect because you have options for what you want to do. I think, having another name is probably a big deal, even if the effect isn't very good. Like, normally if you're summoning Lollipop, you're not actually getting a huge amount of use out of the effect, you're just trying to get away to the Link 1. So I feel like having another name gives you more options for different types of builds you could play with this, and this is just like a strict upgrade to the deck. There's really not that much you can complain about. Then the final card is Yum Yum Yummies. So this is the artwork here is the thing in Japan, I think, that this is based off of, these machines where you like move the hand and try to pull the toys out or whatever. I wish they would turn the crab into a card, because I feel like the crab is the coolest part of all of the artwork. Like, this guy's just dancing around. He might even be in some of the other arts hiding somewhere. Is he in some of the other field spells? I don't know. Maybe he's... Is he? Oh, look, there's a crab over here as well. I really like this crab. He's the coolest character. They should make a card with the crab in it. Anyhow, so this is a continuous spell. This says, each time 2 or more Yummy monsters are special summoned to your field at the same time, gain 500 life points, and if you do, your opponent pays 500 life points. I think that these types of effects are extremely cringe, but they can be very important, especially in time. So, whatever. Anyhow, you can only use each of the following effects of Yum Yum Yummies once per turn. You can pay 500 life points, then target 2 face-up monsters on the field, including Yummy Snatchy. Send both to the graveyard, and if you do, special summon 1 Yummy Synchro monster from your extra deck, which is treated as a Synchro summon. If your opponent activates a card or effect, you can pay 100 life points immediately after this effect resolves. Link summon 1 Yummy Link monster. I think this is a very cool type of card because you're targeting 2 face-up monsters on the field, including Yummy Snatchy, but it doesn't specify which side of the field they have to be on. So once you pay those 500, you're probably going to be targeting your own Yummy Snatchy. And what's cool about this is that if you look at the basic rotation of how the Yummy cards work, is you often will be special summoning your own Yummy Snatchy from the graveyard, for example, off of where is it? The Lollipop Yummy way. Where, so if this card is synchro summoned, you can special summon 2 Yummy monsters from your graveyard, but negate their effects. And so sometimes it feels kind of weird that you've negated the effects because you're going to have a Snatchy with negated effects on field, and you need to use it as material to go into another synchro. But in this case, it doesn't matter that it's negated, because the Snatchy normally is the thing that's doing the synchro summoning with the effect. But now it doesn't matter. You can just use your own Snatchy and then another monster that your opponent controls. Or I guess if you were in the mirror, this could be like a very annoying type of card where you're just targeting your opponent's Snatchy and something else, and you send them to the graveyard, and it sends to the graveyard. It doesn't destroy or anything like that. The only thing is, if your opponent interacts with any of the cards, you're not going to be able to do the Synchro Summon, because this says send both to the graveyard, and if you do, special summon a Yummy Synchro monster from your extra deck. Anyhow, I feel like this is a cool card. Maybe there will be builds that'll say this shouldn't fit in the main deck. This is a side deck card for when you know you're going first. But this card seems pretty solid to me overall, and so I think Yummy has done pretty well in terms of its support. Going over the rest of this stuff, K9 Jax is, I think, okay. K9 Noroi is excellent and contributes the most to K9's game plan. It contributes the most to all of all the game plans of all these decks that I'm talking about. This contributes the most to its own deck's game plan, so they're the major winner. Dragontail Frixel, I don't think is a bad card, but it's just undertuned in a toolbox deck with a very large engine, kind of like how Virtual World was, and I think they need more like OP stuff to stay relevant. Dragontail Sting, I think, is exactly the same thing. It contributes to the toolbox game plan, but it's not super overtuned, which means that Dragontail may fall further behind. Then we have Marshmallow, which I think is a great card, but honestly, because of how Yummy works, there was very little they could do to make this a bad card, just because it's a level 1 that can go into Snatchy, which goes into literally everything. So you just have more ways to play with this, and it also happens to have useful effects. And then finally, we have Yum Yum Yummies, which has the funniest name of, almost any card I've seen in Yu-Gi-Oh! It also has the funny crab in the top, and I think the effect is pretty decent, but maybe you could make an argument that this should not be in the main deck, it should be in the side deck instead. So anyhow, guys, this is my super quick overview of what I think of the new support. I don't want to focus too much on Doom of Dimensions yet. I really like DDD, so I will be focusing on DDD, but I want to cover some more current format content instead first. So thanks for watching. If you want to join the Discord, the link is in the description below, and thanks for watching.